Joining us now to talk about all of this and the administration's aggressive immigration policies, but also America's shifting foreign policies under Trump is Matt Rivers from Mexico City and Mick Mulroy. Mick, of course, is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and a national security and defense analyst for ABC News. And Matt, let's start with you. We just saw your reporting on deportations. The Trump administration dealing with allies like Mexico and El Salvador and also adversaries like Venezuela. So how have priorities in these relations shifted under Trump?
Look, I think whatever Donald Trump's goal is, he's going to carry out more or less the same playbook, whether it's an ally or an adversary, to get to those goals, to reach those goals. Whether you are a fan of Donald Trump's policies or not, what he is pretty consistent with, whether he's talking to allies like here in Mexico or in El Salvador or adversaries with Venezuela, he's just going to do whatever he wants to get to the United States, to reach the goals that he has set forth for the United States. With a country like Mexico, a bit trickier because this is a leftist populist president here in Mexico whose own popularity kind of is attributed to her standing up to Trump. In El Salvador, much easier. He's dealing with Nayib Bukele, who's a big fan of the administration, has spoken at CPAC, wants more U.S. investment. But either way, he's basically imposing his will, or trying to impose his will, on these countries, whether they're adversaries or allies. And that's something that we've seen him really lean into. We saw him do that in the first term, but I think in these first 100 days, we've certainly seen him double down on that kind of strategy.
As Trump says, this is an America First agenda. And Mick, let's broaden this out a bit, because President Biden's State Department really focused on strengthening existing alliances like NATO, but that certainly is not the approach Trump is taking.
Well, that appears to be the case, Mary. And quite frankly, NATO is the most significant military alliance in history. It essentially won the Cold War. It rallied around the United States after the attacks of 9/11 for over 20 years. There was many complaints, not just by President Trump, but President Obama, Bush, Biden, about member states not contributing what they agreed to under the agreement, the NATO agreement itself, the treaty. But that has changed, mostly because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, most member states are paying over the amount that they agreed to. And now the alliance is even more significant, I think, to the national security interest of the United States. So hopefully the Trump administration recognizes that and realizes that it's more important to shore up that alliance rather than to withdraw from it.
And Matt, aside from reporting on Latin America, you've also covered the Middle East extensively. And we know talks on a new nuclear deal with Iran continue. Trump, though, of course, ripped up the first one. So why is he now seeking a deal with Iran, especially when our ally in the region, Israel, has been opposed to it?
Yeah, I mean, remember, this is the guy in 2018 during the first term, like you said, Mary, who unilaterally walked away from a deal. But what happened since then? We've seen a series of years where Iran, despite sanctions on its economy, despite ordinary life for ordinary Iranians getting that much harder, Iran has pushed forward with its nuclear program. It's enriched more uranium, and it's that much closer to be able to, in relatively short order, produce a nuclear weapon. So if you're looking at why Trump wants to make a deal, I think you take three things into account. One, what I just said, the fact that Iran is closer than it had been previously to producing a nuclear weapon should it go down that path. I think the other thing you have to remember is that Trump has a historic aversion to committing U.S. troops to the Middle East. That's one of his big campaign issues, was the Biden administration's quote unquote fumbling of the Afghanistan war. And I think finally he loves the optics of a deal. I mean, you know that, Mary, better than I do, that he loves the idea of being able to say, I tore up the last one, it wasn't that great, let me get a new one in here, and therefore he can be the winner in all of this. So I think when you take all of those things combined, and you take into the fact he doesn't really care all that much about what Benjamin Netanyahu has to say, perhaps, then that leads you to where we are now.
The president certainly likes to tout his art of the deal. And finally, Mick, you mentioned Ukraine. Let's talk about the status of that war right now. A State Department spokeswoman today threw cold water on Moscow's most recent offer of a 3-day ceasefire. The president has said he wants a Russia-Ukraine deal within the next 2 weeks. The administration warning the U.S. will step back as mediators if a peace deal isn't delivered soon. So is that realistic? I mean, is a peace agreement possible in the coming days? And if not, then what next?
Well, unfortunately, Russia would love it for the United States to step back as a mediator. They clearly don't have any pressure on them right now to reach a ceasefire negotiation. They rejected the one that the U.S. proposed in March, a 30-day ceasefire that would allow both sides to sit down and negotiate for a permanent end to this conflict. Everything they've proposed so far has been very self-centered. For example, the one coming up in May is simply for them to have parades without being concerned that they'll be attacked by Ukraine. I think the president now sees that clearly and hopefully understands that the U.S. needs to put pressure on Russia to get them to take this seriously, because right now they do not.
Yes, so many questions about how this is all going to play out. Mick Mulroy, Matt Rivers, thank you as always. We so appreciate your insights.